So I haven't had too many assignments come up recently. The second one that I'm going to talk about in this video actually happened way back in May, so it's been around 3 months since my last assignment. This first one that came up is from ProPublica, which is a nonprofit news organization, and I've done work with them in the past. And this story was about an autistic kid who actually got dragged down a hallway because he did not want to go to recess. So going into this assignment, I figured it was going to be a pretty straightforward, get some portraits and be done with it. I was going to take my large format camera and I was going to take my digital camera as a backup, but primarily I was going to shoot on 4x5 to get the portraits and then do the backup pictures on digital like I always do. But when I actually got there, I could see with my own eyes, and I was told by the parents that Xander is full of energy and he never really stops. So when I got there, he was already running around the yard. He had endless energy, and I knew from the jump that it was going to be very hard, if not impossible, to get a portrait of him using my slow, cumbersome, large format camera. So this is more a lesson in improvising and knowing the equipment that you have, because right away I knew I wasn't going to be able to use the first thing that I wanted to use. And then I was told that he is very shy and hesitant to welcome new people into his life. And they told me that once he is comfortable around someone, he will either scream in their face or give them some knuckles. Eventually, I did grab my camera, and as soon as I picked it up, Xander came up to me and he was immediately starting to grab it out of my hand, mess with it. He was messing with the focus, and his parents were a little concerned about my camera and my gear, but I told them it's fine. He can do whatever he wants with it. I didn't let him have my camera, but I was just letting him play with it, get comfortable with it. And that's actually when I started to take pictures of him. Even when he was directly in front of me, 5 inches away from the lens, I was taking pictures and just making him feel comfortable around the sound of the shutter. So at that point, I just kind of followed him around, ran with him in the yard, watched him jump on the trampoline, and got pictures that way, because when the editor did reach out to me, he was just wanting photos that best represented Xander and how he is, which is a very playful, energetic, and happy kid. So that's what I tried to do with these pictures. And he never really did calm down to the point where I could make any work with the 4x5. But we did end up going in, and he calmed down a little bit, and he started to draw in color. And I think I got some softer moments in there. And then I ended up getting some portraits of the parents outside. And then I called it a day. And by the end of our time together, Xander did finally scream in my face, which I was very proud of. And then he did give me some knuckles. So it might take some time, but you can gain someone's trust, and just as long as you are patient with them and show them that you're there for the long haul and you're not just there to snap some photos and then get out of there as quickly as you can. The next assignment, and the last one that I had back in May, was one for a tornado that actually went through St. Louis. And I'm sure a lot of people know the first assignment that I ever had was back in 2023, and it was for a tornado that went through Glen Allen, Missouri. And that was a crazy assignment to jump into the world of photography like that, because I had never done anything like that before, and to immediately just get thrown into a breaking news story about a tornado was pretty crazy. But this tornado that happened 2 years ago was an EF2 tornado, and it was in a pretty small town. This tornado that went through St. Louis on May 16th was an EF3 tornado, and it went through basically the entire city center of North St. Louis. And I live about 15 minutes south of downtown St. Louis, and this tornado started as an EF0 tornado around Forest Park and then went northeast, eventually going up to an EF3 tornado and then crossing over the Mississippi into Illinois and ending there. And I was actually at the gym the next day when I got the call to drive up to North St. Louis and photograph the damage. And this time it was going to be very quick, and I actually don't own a laptop, so I would not be able to send the photos out in the field. So what I had to do was go in one time and then drive back, edit, upload, and then drive back in to go out again. So immediately I just drove out there. I didn't really have any time to think about anything. The only thing that I could look up was where the actual most damage occurred. And the National Weather Service actually had a map where you could see where the most extensive damage took place. And I saw that around Forest Park was an EF0 or an EF1. And then in North St. Louis, in the Ville neighborhood, it was an EF3. So that's exactly where I knew I needed to go. I parked in an abandoned convenience store parking lot. And right when I got out of my car, a work truck pulled up and there was two men inside. And one, his name was Christopher, and he was driving, and he asked me what I was doing. And I told him, and he told me that he would show me around the neighborhood, introduce me to some people because he knew people whose lives were affected by this tornado. So I walked up one block, he drove the one block, he parked, and then we proceeded to just walk around this one street and speak with people. And obviously when I first showed up, people were very hesitant and they had questions, and I just tried to be upfront and honest with why I was there and what I was doing. And I'm not going to lie, I was pretty emotional when this first happened, because living in the Midwest, you always see tornadoes. Well, you don't see tornadoes. I've never seen one physically, but you see it on the news, you see videos, the sirens go off all the time. You're kind of used to the whole idea of a tornado. But being this close to one, where it was 20 minutes north of my house, it hit home a lot harder. So when I went up to the first individual, his name was Hard Time. He was sitting in his living room where I could see him because his wall was gone, and it was in a pile of bricks on the ground in front of his house. And I just immediately got emotional, and I teared up, and I was fighting back, crying in front of this man. And he was perfectly fine. He was as strong as ever, keeping it together and telling me that it was okay. And I was trying to tell him what I was doing, and that I don't necessarily agree with going out and photographing people on the worst day of their life, but somebody has to do it. And if somebody is going to do it, I would want it to be me, because I feel like I'm going to go about it in a sincere and honest way. And right away, I didn't take any portraits. I was just photographing specific houses or scenes or destruction or whatever you want to call it. And every time that I went to a new house, I spoke with the person, I had a conversation with them, and it was just heartbreaking to hear what they were going through. But the amount of strength that all of them had was very cool to see, because you always think you're going to act kind of like the last assignment. You always think you're going to act a certain way when something happens, but then you're always surprised by yourself. And I don't know how I would react in this situation, but I hope it's like these individuals did. So I walked around the neighborhood for around 2 hours, and then I went back to my house and edited the photos and then sent them off. And then after that, I drove back in, met up with Chris, and then we went around the block again, and then I went to a different neighborhood called Fountain Park, took some photos there, and then I went back home to edit those. Before I left, though, I told Christopher that I would come back a couple days later to make some portraits of everyone, and that's exactly what I did 4 days later. So when I came back, people were still cleaning up, obviously, and I took some portraits of Christopher to start, and then I went back to Hard Time's house, and he was in the same exact position, but there was an entire neighborhood of men helping clean up in his yard, and his daughter was there as well as his granddaughter. And I spoke with him again, and I asked him if I could take his portrait, and I did, and I really loved how it turned out. And then I asked his daughter and granddaughter if I could take their portrait, and again, really loved this specific portrait. And then after that, everyone that was cleaning up, Hard Time wanted a photo of everyone that was helping him out. So everyone got in Hard Time's front yard. And I think this is where the beauty of photography really comes into play for me, because I'm looking at this picture on my wall right now, and I just see a group of men that are helping out someone that they love. And I don't really think back to all the destruction and the damage that I saw on that day. I look at this photo and I think back to the conversations that I had and the strength that I felt from those individuals, and it fills me with hope and happiness. It doesn't fill me with dread or sorrow for what happened that day, even though in the photo you can see that his house is covered with a tarp and there's bricks all over his yard. For me, I just see hope in this picture, and I think that's really great, and that's personally why I love photography, because it can do that. But yeah, I was pretty happy with the work that I made there. I think it was honest and sincere work, and that's all I really hope for out of the work that I do in situations like that. And that's also what I look for when I see people taking pictures and making work around devastating situations like that. But this work kind of ties into a longer project that I've been working on. And I started this project about St. Louis back in November, but I stopped as soon as I started making it because I wanted to do more research and get some historical context on the city of St. Louis. Because even though I do live here, I don't think anyone really knows the history of their city or how it came to be, or what led up to 2025. So I wanted to do that, and I wanted to know at least the basics of the history surrounding St. Louis before I started making work about St. Louis. So I actually stopped, and then back in March or April, I started it back up. The weather was getting a little bit nicer, and making this work has been not easy in terms of story or like compositions or anything like that, but just easy in terms of subject matter. Because for this project, I'm walking around, I'm making pictures around St. Louis. The second part of this project is based around the arch and how I feel like it's a little bit of a distraction to the problems surrounding St. Louis and the history of St. Louis. And that's pretty much the gist of the overall project that I'm working on. But like I said, compared to Articles of Virtue, where I'm driving countless hours, looking for subjects. I finally find a subject. I knock on the door. I ask them. They say no. And then I'm driving countless hours again. For this, I'm just camera over my shoulder, walking around St. Louis, walking around the grounds of the Arch. And it's just a lot easier to find subjects. So that's why I've been able to make a lot of work in a short period of time for it. And I bring up this project because back in June, I actually went to a workshop where I took both of those projects with me to get feedback on. And during that workshop, I was told that the St. Louis work is actually much stronger than Articles of Virtue. It is not only a better body of work, but it has much more importance to it. And it has a lot more weight going on for it. And not to say that my card project is a complete waste of time. I know it's not, but we came to the agreement that if I'm going to put out a book, a first publication, it's going to be this St. Louis work. So while I was at this workshop, I was told to look at the work of multiple photographers, one being Claire Richardson and her project Beyond the Forest. And then another photographer was Richard Rinaldi, who I've been a big fan of for years now, just because he uses large format just like me, even though he uses 8x10. His project, Fall River Boys, was highly recommended for me to look at. And I've actually seen that project in the past, but I've never really dove into it. And it's just really beautiful black and white work of young men set in the Northeast of America. The next one is pretty much every book by John Gossage, but specifically Berlin and the Time of the Wall. And this book is absolutely ginormous. I think it's around 450 pages, but it's set in Berlin around the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Just really great landscape photography, as well as just pretty interesting compositions that make you think outside the box a little bit, which is very good for me because I feel like a lot of my work can be a little too rigid and strict with the way that the compositions are. So I've been looking into more John Gossage and trying to get some inspiration from him. And then the last one, which I actually ended up purchasing this book, it's Imperial Courts by Dana Lixenberg. And essentially she had an assignment back in the 90s for a magazine to go into South LA and photograph the Imperial Courts neighborhood. And while she was there, she developed very close relationships with the people that lived there. And she ended up going back multiple years over a 20-year period. And the beautiful thing about this project is that it allows you to see the passage of time. It will show a picture of a man in 1993, and then on the next page, it will show that man's son as a teenager in 2008. And it does that throughout the course of the book. So you can see this passage of time, you can see the family members, and you can just see the connection that they have through this one specific community. But yeah, I just think it was a very beautiful project, and it was very good inspiration for what I am currently working on, because I don't want it to be a thing of just showing up and photographing people in St. Louis. I want to be able to connect with people, build deeper relationships, because that's going to be able to tell a better story overall. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking to just go out there, make some pictures in 2 weeks, and then make a book. I want everything that I put out to be thoughtful and just honest and sincere, just like it's always been. And that's what I plan on doing. So yeah, that's where I've been. I think one of the next videos that I have coming out will be about my trip to Europe that I took. I've never been to Europe before, and I went out there for 2 weeks to photograph a wedding, and we ended up going to Spain and Portugal. And what I hope to do is make that into a small, affordable zine, because I don't think that I would make a book, like a legitimate book, out of that. But I do want to make something physical for people to hold, and something that's not just in a YouTube video or an Instagram post. So be on the lookout for that. But if you guys have any questions about anything, let me know. Thanks again for all the feedback that you give me, all the positive comments, and look forward to making the next one. See ya.